Is Red Dead Redemption still fun to play in 2025? Hey folks, and welcome to my critique of Red Dead Redemption and Undead Nightmare. I'd like to start by telling you a story about why it took me so long to play Red Dead Redemption when it came out in 2010, even though all my friends were raving about it. Long story short, I had played Red Dead Revolver. I used to buy any PS2 game that looked halfway interesting. I saw Red Dead Revolver one day and was like, hey, I remember playing the demo for Outlaws back in the late 90s. Let's see how this new Western game plays. Unfortunately, I found Red Dead Revolver to be an unenjoyable mess. Granted, I was much younger and more stubborn. Today, I could probably find something interesting to discuss after playing it. But back then, nope. Moving on, next game. That's why, when everyone was going nuts about Rockstar making a sequel called Red Dead Redemption, I didn't understand what the big deal was. Sure, Grand Theft Auto 4 was fun, but did anyone even play Red Dead Revolver? I had no confidence, so I ignored all the hoopla. Then, 3 years later, I felt I should play some of the big hits of the last few years that I'd neglected for one reason or another. I played the Game of the Year edition of Red Dead Redemption on the PS3 and had a great time. I liked the atmosphere of riding around the Old West. I thought the ending was one of the best things I'd ever played at that point in my life, and the roar of a bobcat instilled a terror in me that still might be unmatched to this day. Now, many years have passed since I last played Red Dead Redemption. A lauded sequel has come out, as well as a remaster, which is what I played for this video. I've also heard plenty of folks talk about how much they love Undead Nightmare. Even though I had the Game of the Year edition back then, I never played the DLC for whatever reason. Wanting to finally play the sequel, and it being so long since having played the original, I thought Red Dead Redemption was a great candidate for a critique. I've played through the base game and then Undead Nightmare for this video. The following are my thoughts and feelings about if the game holds up as well as I remember it, what parts I found worth discussing, and if I think Undead Nightmare lives up to the hype I've heard about it. I won't be going through the story beat by beat, but I will be discussing the ending, and the whole game in general. So consider that a spoiler warning. Okay, let's see what I thought about Red Dead Redemption all these years later. One aspect of games that has been annoying me of late is how developers feel the need to shoehorn gameplay systems into parts of games that don't need them. Whether it's a fear of the player getting bored if they're not doing something every few minutes, or whether it's an adherence to the past, because games have always been this way, I find that when a game has greater ambitions than purely its systems and mechanics, this style of thinking only creates friction, and not the good kind of friction that pushes back against a player to deepen their mechanical engagement. Red Dead Redemption is a great example of this. What we have here is a sprawling Western epic about a man trying to gain the freedom of his wife and son by traveling the countryside and hunting down the outlaws that he used to run with. Most missions begin with the player riding to a location with another character. They talk. Travel takes time, and the game expects the player to luxuriate in the beauty of the landscapes while listening to the conversation, adding weight and texture to not only the story, the characters, and the world, but the violence that is about to take place. Once the mission is over, the next protocol might be half a map away, which is often the case in Act 2 down in Mexico. So if there's no fast travel wagon available, and the player doesn't want to make camp to warp to the nearest settlement, they must ride alone. Without conversation, the landscape is the player's only companion. And one would think Rockstar brave in 2010 to engineer long stretches of gameplay where the player is alone with their thoughts. But Red Dead Redemption doesn't work that way. Whether it's emergent quests of people broken down needing help, gunshots in the distance, or the roar of a wild animal, the player is not given the opportunity to be left alone with their thoughts for long. The game intrudes. It intrudes, but it intrudes without confidence. Judging by the extensive dialogue and how each mission begins with a horse ride or wagon trip, one would assume this is what the game wishes to showcase. Yes, this is ultimately an open-world action game by Rockstar, essentially Grand Theft Auto as a Western, but the lack of fast cars and cramped city streets change the relationship the player has to the open world itself. In every Grand Theft Auto game I've played, there have been times between missions where I have reveled in the systems of the open world, indulging my worst impulses, causing mayhem, and seeing how long I could stay alive with an entire police force bearing down on me. In this playthrough of Red Dead Redemption, I never once punched a civilian or shot at a deputy. The closest I got to mayhem was an emergent quest where I was bringing a safe into town, and right at the last moment, a dog ran in front of me, and hitting it turned the whole town against me. I went to pay off my fine for being a wanted man as soon as possible. In GTA, the player is encouraged to find joy in creating chaos, and while that is possible in Red Dead Redemption, it feels like the ability to cause such chaos was because Rockstar was making an open world game, and such systems were expected of them. Once again, the game intrudes. I brought up Mexico earlier as an example of a mission having you travel half a map away. It's by far the largest expanse in the game, and you'll travel across it more than once. There are missions where you'll kick things off in conversation before falling to silence while the cinematic camera glamorizes your travel. In these moments, it's tempting to press the button to skip right to your destination, like I always did when taking a wagon to a settlement. But there were occasions where after some silence, conversation started up again. Writing and talking are such prominent parts of the game that it's difficult to know if I'll miss any interesting or important dialogue by skipping ahead, and if that's preferable to the alternative, which is reaching my destination in the middle of an interesting conversation and having it abruptly cut off. Which is what happened in what I'd consider the most egregious example in the entire game. Not only of cutting off player dialogue, but of gamifying the story Rockstar is trying to tell for no good reason I can figure other than a game's gotta have gameplay. This is near the game's climax. John has successfully hunted down every member of his old gang the government wanted him to, and at least for now, is free to live a life of peace with his wife and son, while trying to make it as a farmer. He receives a telegram from Bonnie, who rescued him at the very start of the game. Her crops have failed, and she's asking for help. Abigail joins John as he loads up a wagon with corn and rides over to Bonnie's farm. They engage in conversation as Abigail doesn't know what to make of her husband's friendship with this Bonnie, but the conversation is cut short because instead of just riding to the farm as the married couple converse, there is a timer. The game wants the player to reach Bonnie's farm as fast as possible. Narratively, I can kinda see why. If they're out of food, time is of the essence. But while the game space of Red Dead Redemption feels like it's trying to represent every biome of the continental United States, in terms of time spent riding, Bonnie is a few minutes down the road. What this results in is pushing the wagon as much as I dared, so I reached Bonnie in the middle of a conversation between John and Abigail. After the cutscene when the married couple is riding home, and I no longer had a timer telling me to hurry, their conversation played out in its entirety. I know that the conversations are designed to be something to keep the player engaged during their travels, as well as a way to engage with character and world building during these moments. But even when the game isn't trying to get you to ride as fast as possible, the conversations never line up with travel time. I think that's why a solution of many games after Red Dead Redemption has been the slow walk and talk, where the game will cut the player's movement speed as they're talking to other characters. But even these often fail because the player can become distracted while walking, or worry that if they keep moving, they'll reach the destination before the dialogue has played out. We've all played too many games that have broken this immersion, so there's little trust towards letting these sequences of riding or walking play out the way we think they're supposed to. This could be solved by leaning more on cutscenes, which personally I prefer to all these supposed solutions that don't want to take control away from the player, and so mask their storytelling with these half measures. I might be in the minority here, but if you're going to limit my ability to move through the game to play through a scene, I'd rather control be taken away entirely. I don't like when Half-Life 2 locked me in a room until the story sequence ended, and I don't like when I pick up an audio log and either have to stand still and listen, or risk being distracted by gameplay if I choose to continue playing the game as I'm listening to someone tell me their backstory. At least Red Dead Redemption's rides to the mission sorta work. The landscape is often beautiful, and the conversation is worth listening to. I don't want to lambaste Red Dead Redemption for not being able to perfectly combine gameplay with their storytelling ambitions, because 15 years later, games are still wrestling with this. But I have to wonder if they managed to improve this aspect of the game in Red Dead Redemption 2. So I've made the argument that the gameplay of Red Dead Redemption intrudes on the way the game wants to tell its story. So let's discuss the gameplay itself and why that's the case. John is an outlaw who wanted to retire to a farm with his wife and son and live a life of peace after too many years of being a wanted man engaging in despicable acts. The US government hold his wife and son hostage and task him with tracking down and either capturing or executing the members of his gang that are still on the loose. This is the justification for John being so good with a gun, even though at the start of the game he gets shot by his former colleague Bill Williams and left for dead on the side of the road. And then when you reach Mexico, John has to learn how to shoot properly from Landon Ricketts. I don't want to say John's a bad shot, since between these two incidents you likely shoot hundreds of people and wild animals. But it does paint John as always being in over his head, and never really knowing what's going on, despite a base level of politeness and player-controlled competency. There's a lot of luck involved too, until it all runs out at the end of the game. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The gunplay is lifted from Grand Theft Auto 4. Cover is important, and when popping out of cover to aim at an enemy, the auto-aim snaps towards the nearest bandit. If the Deadeye meter is full, the player can slow down time, and running the cursor over any enemies will tag them. When the mode runs out of time, or the player triggers its end themselves, John will hit all the spots targeted. Until Landon Ricketts, I found this system annoying because the player can't tag where the shots land. If the cursor touches any part of an enemy in Deadeye mode, a tag will appear, and unless I move the cursor off the enemy immediately, I'd waste more than one shot on another part of their body. Finally, after meeting Landon, the player gets the ability to tag manually in Deadeye mode, and benefits of the system truly show themselves. Some of the waves of enemies they throw at you in Mexico is absolutely ridiculous, as is the raft ride into the country in the first place, before you gain access to this improved tagging ability. And that's pretty much the important stuff. Yes, there are missions involving lassoing wild horses or wrangling cattle, and there's gambling, such as Liar's Dice, Blackjack, and Poker, which I spent far too much time playing. But the majority of the game is riding somewhere, shooting from cover, and using Deadeye to get rid of as many enemies as possible. There's also dueling, which I feel is somewhat underused. It's at least climactic, and is the last action the player performs before the game ends. However, it is not the climactic moment. After John returns from Mexico, having captured or killed Bill Williamson and Javier Escuela, it's time to find Dutch Vanderland. Only after ending Dutch will the government allow John to live a life of peace with his family. The reasons for this and the justification of the government all feel backloaded into this final act of the game. Yes, Red Dead Redemption has been pushing a theme of how you cannot stop the forward march of technology, and how the US government sees itself as such an inevitability. But seeing that it's only in this section where taking missions from John's handlers, the explicit nature of their discussions feel like they've come out of nowhere, even though they've been building in the background the whole game. Heck, this is the first time we actually meet Dutch, and I would have loved to have more opportunity to witness scenes between him and John. Another reason to look forward to Red Dead Redemption 2. Once Dutch has been dealt with, the game slows down, which is ironic considering the pacing thus far. The aforementioned wagon ride with Abigail is in this section, as is going hunting with John's son Jack, and dealing with the old drunk they call Uncle. Eventually, the government make their move against John and attack his farm. John gets Abigail and Jack to safety before walking outside his barn to confront the government posse tying up its loose ends. Now, when I first played through Red Dead Redemption back in 2013, I thought this sequence was brilliant. John walks out the barn doors, and the player is confronted with at least a dozen goons to gun down. Deadeye mode triggers automatically, but even with his 6-shooter and John's expertise with a firearm, it's not enough. John is outgunned and outmanned. That the game has spent its entire runtime having the player rely on how powerful Deadeye mode is, only to showcase that it's not enough in this confrontation, is a stroke of genius. It also reinforces that just as the Old West cannot outrun the march of technology and civilization, neither can John outrun his past deeds. John couldn't fight the government. Let's just ignore that the end of Act 2 was John fighting against a corrupt government and winning. For years, I've held this moment up as one of the prime examples of mechanics as metaphor. It's a concept where the systems and mechanics of a game are used as a key component of the storytelling. The game having too many enemies to take out with Deadeye after the amount of people the player has killed with it sells the hopelessness of his situation far stronger than if John's last stand had been a cutscene. This time, playing the PS4 remaster, I wondered if the sequence had glitched. First off, it took far too long to engage Deadeye mode. Look at how I'm just taking in the sights. Maybe it felt long because I knew what was about to happen. I went to YouTube and watched this scene on the PS3, and Deadeye engages a lot more quickly. Of course, I also seem to screw up tagging enough guys, so John gets gunned down without much of a fight. I guess that makes it more tragic? I don't know. It felt like whether through the game or my own actions, this climactic moment was somewhat robbed of its power. I guess that's the danger of mechanics as metaphor. Like missing a piece of environmental storytelling by having the camera aimed in the wrong direction, putting control over a pivotal story moment in the player's hands can make it lose its impact. But at least Red Dead Redemption ends strongly. Years later, Jack is at his father's grave. It's time to hunt down the man responsible for John's death. This journey takes you on a scenic horse ride across the whole map one last time, anticipating this final showdown. Of course, the man responsible is old now, and it's less a duel and more a formality. Jack gets his revenge, and the player now has a way to continue enjoying the open world if they so choose. I still feel like Red Dead Redemption can't balance its open world and action gameplay with its storytelling ambitions. You'll notice that I spent quite a while positively talking about the climax and ending of the game after having very little to say about what happens in Act 1 and 2. So much of Red Dead Redemption feels like it's spinning its wheels, and suddenly when you leave Mexico, the game says, oh shit, we only have a few hours of game time left. I guess we'd better wrap everything up. that it ends so strongly is a testament to it. But for a game that spends so much of its time reveling in the slow pace of travel, allowing the player to soak in its world and atmosphere, it would have been nice to extend the same courtesy to the narrative. But maybe Undead Nightmare handles things better. Before we find out, if you're enjoying the video so far, I'd appreciate if you'd hit those like and subscribe buttons. I feel a bit skeevy for putting this in the middle of my critique, but it really does help extend the reach of the video and my channel, so thank you. Now, let's talk zombies. So does the DLC Undead Nightmare do a better job balancing its gameplay and narrative? Hell no, it's not even interested in that. Undead Nightmare is Red Dead Redemption, the arcade game. As I said in the intro, I never played this back when I first played Red Dead Redemption, but I'd always heard it was a popular piece of DLC that flooded the map of the original game with zombies. I had always assumed that this was a clever idea on the part of the developers to bring John Marston back from the dead after the events of the first game. So imagine my surprise when this is an alternate timeline where the world goes to shit after John's settled down on his farm alongside his family. Abigail and Jack are both turned into zombies one fateful night, so John hogties them and sets off to nearby Blackwater to find out just what the heck is going on and if he can save his family. Here starts a game loop of finding a settlement of survivors, clearing out the place of zombies to acquire a new weapon and to allow you to save your game. It took me far too long to realize that the first thing a player should do when entering an overrun settlement is run to wherever the survivor leader is. Not only does it make it easy to talk to them, but they're usually in a prime spot to shoot zombies without worrying about being bitten. There are so many settlements and so many weapons. There are two reasons for this. One is that for a game with combat that's not too mechanically deep, the feel of different weapons adds much needed variety. The second and most important reason is that each weapon, even those of the same type, like two different shotguns, take different ammo. Ammo is scarce. Zombies die from headshots, and Deadeye is the easiest way to make sure they're dealt with. But when overrun, it's easy to waste ammo in a panic. And while you can find a few bullets here and there on zombie corpses, the reward for clearing the settlement will make you rely on your new weapon for a while. When you finally run out of ammo for it, hopefully you've gathered enough ammunition of other weapons to fall back on. Eventually, by the time I reached the end of the DLC, I had so many high-powered weapons with good ammo reserves that this wasn't an issue. But I am pleasantly surprised how long this scarcity of ammunition and the tension it provides is kept going throughout the adventure. I just wish the game worked better. I found myself accidentally crouching when trying to run away, and the angles needed to loot the corpses for their much needed ammo were far too inconsistent yet specific. I would sometimes just give up and run to a different body. This feeling of the game not working the way I wanted it to mirrors how the game treats its characters. Most of the mission givers of Red Dead Redemption were awful people that I did not enjoy spending time with. Most of these characters are thriving in the chaos of the zombie apocalypse. The few that I did enjoy, like Bonnie, are dealing with grief and hardship. At least Landon Ricketts is using his retirement, happily blowing up the undead, but goddamn is Undead Nightmare bleak. The less said about how the Sasquatch side quest ends, the better. I mean, yeah, man is truly the real monster. We've all seen a zombie movie. But the degree to which this is the case is baffling. Early on in Blackwater, you see the citizens lobby accusations about the cause of the plague. Like it takes almost nothing for the polite veneer to be scratched off the people of the United States before their ugly cores bleed out onto the ground. That the cause of the zombie plague is from Mexico and is the cause of the havoc stateside is subtext so thinly veiled that Garth Marenghi would celebrate it. But eventually, John deals with the curse and all is put back to normal. At least until the undead John Marsden emerges from his grave so the open world shenanigans can continue in perpetuity. The arcade nature of the game keeps going as well, with towns you've liberated under attack needing to be rescued again. There's no reward the second time round, but I guess it's nice to have another place to save and something to do. Personally, I'd load up the open world of the original game. At least there I can sit down for a round of poker without worrying about my face getting gnawed off. I said that the gameplay kept intruding on what Red Dead Redemption wanted to be. The slow pace of the open world and its western setting, full of leisurely rides with characters conversing with each other, was constantly broken up by gameplay sections that either lasted too long or felt tacked on because the player needed something to do. Often both. Meanwhile, we have Undead Nightmare, an expansion focused primarily around the combat, which showcases why the gameplay felt like such an intrusion in the first place. It's not that I think the combat is bad. I don't think any one element of the game is bad. I just find how Red Dead Redemption weighs immersion, gameplay, and narrative completely unbalanced, and that leads to an ultimately unsatisfying experience. But what are your thoughts? Did you find the game as unbalanced? Do you enjoy Undead Nightmare? What's your favorite part of Red Dead Redemption? Let me know down in the comments. And that's it for another critique. The final one of the year. Coming up next is the 2025 video, where I review all the games that came out in 2025 that captured my interest. And then afterwards, I'll be making a critique on Astrobot. I hope you'll join me for both. If you'd like to keep informed about how those videos are progressing as well as other projects, why not join up for free on my Patreon? You get access to monthly updates and my Monday Musings column the week after it comes out. For only $3 a month, you get early access to the videos, the Monday Musings column, and you get to vote in the polls whenever I'm unsure what to stream next. I think it's a good deal, so why not go have a look? If nothing else, I'd appreciate if you gave the video a like and subscribe if you haven't already. So until next time, I hope you're all well, are enjoying your gaming, and are having a wonderful day.